NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg met troops participating in exercise Cold Response in northern Norway on Friday. The Secretary General said Cold Response shows NATO unity and strength in action, with forces from Europe and North America training together. 30,000 personnel are taking part in the Norwegian-led exercise, including NATO's closest partners, Finland and Sweden. 220 aircraft have been deployed, as well as 50 ships, including 2 aircraft carrier groups from the United Kingdom and Italy. The Secretary General added that Cold Response demonstrates NATO's ability to defend against any threat from any direction.
Russia's war against Ukraine is a watershed moment. It is a new normal for European security and also for Arctic security. NATO is an Arctic alliance. 4 out of 5 Arctic littoral states are NATO nations. It is a region of strategic importance for the security of the entire Europe.
And joining me to discuss the takeaways from NATO's extraordinary summit is international affairs analyst Boye Akiuku. He joins me from the U.S., Richmond, Texas, via Zoom. Good to have you join us.
Hello, good morning.
So let's begin with the latest. We see that the U.S. and Europe, in trying to continue to project the image of unity and coordination, have now agreed to end reliance on Russian energy. What is the implication of these for Russia when you add this to every other sanction we've seen so far? And how do you think that President Vladimir Putin will react to this? How would he interpret and react to this?
Okay, good morning once again. Cutting off the Russian oil from Europe is going to be very hard on Russia. It's the mainstay of the economy. Oil is one of the most important things that Russia relies on, and Europe is one of their biggest markets. So cutting it off is going to be a big hit on Russia. And I'll wait to see what the Russian president's response will be to this. I guess it's going to be probably pumping more oil into China or the alternative markets, but it's going to be a big hit because Europe is one of the biggest markets for Russia at the moment.
And in terms of how he interprets this, I was speaking more in terms of the war. Do you think that he takes this as an offensive and then escalate the war in Ukraine?
The Russian president is not very predictable when it comes to things like this, but I don't think this is not going to likely be considered as a confrontational thing from the European countries. They have not lifted an arm, they've not lifted guns or anything against Russia. So I don't see this as one of the things that the Russian president would take as being a direct hit on Russia.
And there was also, speaking about the latest, there's also a statement from Russia's defense ministry saying they have achieved the first phase their main target in the first phase of this war, which they call a special operation. They say that achievement is really about liberating, they are moving now to liberate the Donbas region. But in terms of achievement, in what we've seen so far, there was a report recently how that has not been verified, but it says that about 10,000 Russian forces have been killed so far in this war. Do you really think that when you look at this war, that Vladimir Putin has achieved what is set out to achieve in what he has called the first phase?
On the surface of it, I won't agree that they've achieved what they have set to achieve. We don't know what the parameters they are looking at, but looking at it from the surface, Ukraine has put up a lot more fights than everyone thought or expected. Personally, I thought by now Russia would have overrun Ukraine and things would have been more settled, but it's not looking like that. From recent reports, Ukraine is pushing back the Russian soldiers on ground, and that doesn't look like things are going according to plan, if you look at it from the reports we're getting.
And we're also getting report that the Ukrainian forces are reoccupying several areas within the capital, Kiev. But how long do you think that Ukrainian forces can hold out in terms of how Russia continues to bombard some of these areas, especially Mariupol?
You have to admit that the Ukrainians have put up a very good fight. They are very bold. They are not deterred by the bombardment, and they are making progress under those circumstances. I don't think Russia will be able to take control as initially thought, because they are putting up a good fight. No matter no matter what happens to them, they are not giving up the fight. So it looks like Ukraine will continue to fight no matter what, from what we have seen so far.
We've seen several negotiations between representatives of Russia and Ukraine, but that has proved abortive in terms of reaching an agreement. If this war continues, how long do you think that the US and Europe will continue or will go on in terms of its support for Ukraine and sending weapons and ammunitions?
Looking at it, everyone hopes the negotiations we have a breakthrough on those negotiations as quickly as possible so that this can end. But the entire world seems to be in need for a long time. They are ready to support Ukraine from what we have seen. They are ready to support Ukraine, and they will continue to support Ukraine for as long as this goes on. I don't see any of the Western powers, the European nations, I don't see any of them backing down anytime on the issues on ground here.
And we've also seen several bombings at the Ukraine-Poland border. And we understand that that's generating fear in Poland as to whether this war is likely to escalate to Poland, which is now very critical in terms of being a military base for Nato and a humanitarian center for refugees and other humanitarian agencies. Are you worried? Do you share that worry that if this continues, if Russia continues to fire ammunitions and it hits that border, that this is likely to escalate?
Definitely, if anything crosses into Poland, I'm sure the NATO forces will respond. From what we have seen, the NATO Secretary General was saying it yesterday. All the forces are ready, they're prepared. I'm sure they have different scenarios and they're looking at all those things. If anything crosses into any of the NATO countries, I believe there's going to be a strong response from what we have heard from the US president, the other European president, Polish president. So it's going to escalate very quickly if that happens. I'm sure most of the Western countries are cautious at the moment, but if that happens, they won't have a choice but to respond.
And so we've also seen the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, calling for a face-to-face meeting and negotiation with President Putin. That hasn't happened. Are you optimistic that will happen? And who can broker that kind of meeting between both leaders?
Being optimistic, I would hope that happens very soon. The Ukrainian president has been open for those talks and negotiations from like day 2 or day 3 of the war. So, and he has come out publicly saying the same thing. On the second or third day, he came out to say he had called the Russian president, he wasn't picking up, and he's calling out for negotiations right now. So we are hopeful this will yield some fruit sometime very soon to end this war. If there's going to be any leader that can broker this, it has to be one of the European superpowers. The French president had communications, and the German president had communications with the Russian president until not so long ago. Those are the avenues that can be explored, and hopefully they can come up with something to kill the whole situation, and hopefully things go back to normal as quickly as possible.
We're expecting more briefings from Europe, and we will see how things play out. Thank you so much for talking to us, International Affairs Analyst Boye Akioku.
Thank you very much for having me.